When we look at the world, we can definitely see that evil is real. Just turn on the news, and after 5 seconds, you'll see, there's evil in the world. There's people who are committing evil deeds in the world. At the same time, goodness is also very real. If we open our eyes, we can find many people who have been so good to us. And many people who are striving to live lives of deep faith and deep love, right? To really follow the Lord and spread His good news. So this world, as Jesus explains to us, is like a field. A field where there's many seeds that have been sown, and there is the good seed, the wheat, who are the children of the light, and then there are the weeds, the bad seed, the children of the evil one. This field that Jesus is speaking about can indeed refer to the whole world, because at the beginning, when he's explaining the parable at the beginning, he says, the field is the world. But then later on, it seems like he could also see this field as the church. Because he says, when he's explaining the parable, and he's talking about how at the end of the age, the angels will come to sift the weeds and the wheat, he says, the Son of Man will send His angels, and they will collect out of His kingdom all who cause others to sin and all evildoers. So if they're collecting this out of His kingdom, it means that in His very own church, right, in His followers, there are weeds and there is wheat as well. So we could also see this field not only as the world in general, but actually also as the church. Even within the church, there's those who are really striving to follow the Lord, to be faithful to Him, and perhaps some who are just not as serious, who maybe say they are Christian, but they're not really taking the faith to heart. And there's many terms that people use sometimes to describe this, like maybe lukewarm Christians, right? The scriptures themselves in the book of Revelation speak about this, the fact that we can fall into being lukewarm, right, Christians, or maybe Pharisaical Christians, right, where maybe we check the boxes externally of what it means to be Christian and we come to Mass, but really the way we behave in the world is very non-Christian. There's also the term cafeteria Christian or cafeteria Catholic, right? Of kind of, I follow Jesus, but I choose which things I want to follow from His teachings and which ones I don't, right? This is just the reality of the world and the reality of the church. There's wheat and then there's weeds. It actually happens to me with some regularity that I'll be somewhere, maybe at a coffee shop or something, and I'll strike a conversation with someone, and they see I'm a priest, and so they start talking about the faith, and they'll tell me a little bit about their faith background, and they'll say something like, I grew up Catholic, or I grew up Christian, but I kind of stopped believing, or stopped just going to church, because I saw so much hypocrisy. They'll say, I saw people there at church, but then I saw them how they behaved outside church, and I was like, oh my gosh, right? And so they were discouraged and left. Now, I don't think we're justified in leaving the church if we see these weeds and weeds, but I think these conversations I have with some regularity just point to the fact that what Jesus is saying is true, that there is indeed weeds and weeds inside the church. And this is not something new, like, it's just like as of late. From the very beginning of the church, this was happening. Think about the first 12 disciples of the Lord, the 12 apostles. We read in the Gospels that Judas, one of the first apostles, right, one of the first bishops, he was stealing from the contributions that were supposed to go to the poor. There it is, in the very beginning of the church, some wheat and then some weed. Somebody who is supposed to be close to the Lord and who's stealing contribution from the contributions that are supposed to go to the poor. And then he, of course, we know, betrays the Lord. We can get possibly frustrated with seeing this and wanting the Lord to say, just take out all these weeds out of the church, Lord. And I think there's a good desire there. We should want, right, the church to be faithful and pure. And yet, in the parable that the Lord shares, the servants kind of have this attitude. And they say, Master, Do you want us to go and pull them up regarding the weeds? And the master says, no. No, if you pull up the weeds, you might uproot the wheat along with them. Some of the church fathers, the early kind of Christians that wrote about this passage would say that here there's a reference to the Lord wanting to allow time for conversion. Right? Instead of the Lord just weeding out everybody who's not being faithful or who is unfaithful one time, He wants to allow time for conversion. So it's a good desire for us to have of wanting the church to be converted, and we should pray for this, right? But if we have this attitude of wanting like people just to like disappear because there are weeds or whatever, we should try to adopt the Lord's own attitude of wanting people's conversion and praying for them, right? Praying for the conversion of the world, praying for the conversion of the church. Now I want to say one more thing about this fact of maybe being frustrated when we see just evil in the world or evil in the church. In the early 1900s, the Times, which is a British newspaper, is still around. They ran a series of articles by eminent writers and thinkers of the time asking what was wrong with the world. And so they would write these articles, this series, of just trying to explain away what is it that is wrong with the world. And I haven't read all they said, but I'm assuming, they blame different things, like something about maybe poverty or economics or the government. And there's this thinker at the time, there's a Christian Catholic thinker who was not part of these articles, but as he saw these articles coming out of the Times, he wrote to the Times, right, giving his opinion, and he said, his name is G.K. Chesterton, you may have heard of him. He's a pretty well-known author. So he writes and he says, "Dear sirs, what is wrong with the world? I am." That's all he said. And I love it. Dear sirs, what is wrong with the world? I am. You spend so much time trying to blame, right, what is wrong with the world, or with the church, right? What is wrong with the church? Oh, it's the bishops. If we only had more outspoken and faithful bishops, then the issues will be solved in the church. Or it's the lay faithful. If only they would answer the call to holiness, then yes, everything will be solved. Or it's the liturgy. If we had the most amazing liturgy, then everything would go away. No. Well, these are real issues, and we can talk about those things, and some of them may be right, but what is wrong with the church? I say this lovingly, you are. Okay? And I am. And I am. Are we really 100% wheat? Are we sure about that we're 100% wheat? Or are we not perhaps also part of the weeds? At least part of our hearts. Maybe we need conversion, and we do. And so, we should channel energies of wanting the conversion of the world, yes, to evangelize, but also to really look at our own conversion. Because insofar as you become wheat yourself, the field around you will transform from weeds into wheat.